A man walked ashore completely naked and then entered a bustling park. Faced with the curious gazes of older women and a man with a hat eating snacks, he felt no embarrassment and was entirely accustomed to such situations. After all, this was his 999th time experiencing it. The man's name was Henry, and he was a 200-year-old immortal being. With his undying body, the one thing he had in abundance was time. He traveled the world, spoke countless languages, and searched tirelessly for the secret behind his immortality. However, his only sorrow was watching the people around him come and go, while he remained as youthful as ever. One day, Henry, as usual, took the subway to work. Why not drive instead? Because only crowded places offered the chance to meet women, Henry sat down beside a blonde woman. With just a subtle 45-degree glance, he started a conversation in fluent Russian. The woman was curious how he knew she was Russian. Henry explained that there was chocolate residue on the corner of her mouth, and her bag contained unfinished Russian chocolate. This instantly made the woman feel a sense of connection with him. Henry seized the opportunity, pointing out the wide indentations on her fingers but the absence of marks on her chin, deducing she played the cello. He then wished her good luck with her evening performance. The woman, delighted by his observation, warmly invited him to her performance and even suggested they grab a drink afterward. This was exactly what Henry had hoped for, and he readily accepted. However, the next moment, disaster struck. The entire subway car was thrown into chaos. A steel rod pierced through Henry's chest, and when he turned, he saw the woman beside him dead, her eyes wide open in shock. How had this day turned into such a tragedy? Henry had witnessed countless deaths in his lifetime, yet he himself was ageless and immortal, possessing the power of infinite resurrection. This extraordinary ability traced back to 100 years. On a capitalist merchant ship, Henry, serving as the ship's doctor, treated an elderly black man suffering from a cold. However, the ship's captain insisted the man had a contagious disease and decided to throw him overboard as shark bait. When Henry stood up for justice, he was shot dead by the captain and thrown into the sea. From that night onward, Henry was mysteriously transformed by the mercy of God. Every time Henry experienced death, he would return to the same body of water. The only awkward part was that he always came back completely naked. Because of this, he considered his resurrection not a blessing but a curse. Seeing the angry man with the hat approaching, Henry quickly explained that it wasn't intentional. Once he got out of the mess, Henry turned to see his son, Abel, there to pick him up. Abel was the only person who knew Henry's secret. The two soon returned to Abel's antique shop, where Henry recounted the events of his day. Afterward, Henry went to his secret base and recorded the pain level of this latest death. He believed that the reason he couldn't truly die was that the pain level still wasn't high enough. Through countless personal experiences, Henry had become a true expert on death not out of obsession, but in pursuit of a way to lift his curse. To this end, he had also become an extraordinarily skilled forensic pathologist, spending his days surrounded by cold, lifeless bodies. He believed that to understand death, he had to be where death was most prevalent. Meanwhile, our female lead, Cho, arrived at the accident scene. She discovered Henry's pocket watch in the subway car but didn't yet know who its owner was. Previously, her colleague Black had informed her that the scene's forensic expert believed the dispatcher had died of a heart attack. They concluded the train collision was an accident and not caused by foul play. Black asked Joe to visit the forensic office and sign off on the dispatcher's cause of death. If there were no issues, they could close the case. Following orders, Joe entered the forensic office only to catch sight of Henry conducting an autopsy on the dispatcher. This was their first meeting. Without much small talk, they began their work. After Henry cut open the dispatcher's chest cavity, he immediately noticed something unusual about the cause of death. "Are you saying he didn't die naturally?" Joe asked skeptically. Henry then pulled out a handful of foam from the lungs. The thick foam indicated that the dispatcher had pulmonary edema. Based on this, Henry concluded that the man had likely been poisoned. However, a detailed independent analysis report was still needed to confirm his findings. Joe found it hard to believe, but Lucas assured her, "Don't doubt it. If Henry has determined the cause of death, he's 99.9% accurate." This revelation meant that what had been thought to be an accident involving 15 deaths was now a homicide. At that moment, Henry received a mysterious phone call from an unknown person. The caller not only knew about the subway accident but also knew that Henry had survived it. Henry's expression changed instantly. "Who are you?" he asked. "Henry," the caller said, "you can't imagine how long I've been searching for someone like you." "What kind of person? Don't play games with me. You know exactly who you are, and I know who I am." With that, the caller hung up. Panicked Henry returned to the antique shop and began packing his belongings. He planned to take Abel and flee to a new city. However, Abel refused to leave. He told Henry, running away isn't the answer. The key now is to find out who this person is and what they want. But Henry couldn't shake the haunting memories of his past traumatic experiences. Although 172 years had passed, Henry still remembered being captured for human experiments. Every drop of his blood had been drained, and his organs were dissected in the name of science. Even though he was immortal, the pain he endured was real, leaving him with deep fear and trauma. The next day at work, Henry received a mysterious letter. It had no postmark or return address, and Lucas hadn't seen anyone deliver it. In his office, Henry opened the envelope and was stunned by its contents. Inside was an intimate photo of him with a woman, his late wife, who had passed away long ago. The photo was taken at a party in 1955. Henry had no idea how the mysterious sender had obtained the photo, but it was clear their intentions weren't pure. The letter also contained a brief note, QED quadrat demonstrandum. It's used in mathematical proofs, meaning that which was to be demonstrated. As Henry read the bottom part of the note, he immediately understood its implication. He went to the morgue, retrieved the dispatcher's body, and extracted a vial of blood. It became evident that the mysterious individual had poisoned the dispatcher to see if Henry could truly die. By identifying the poison used, Henry believed he could uncover the culprit behind it all. The quickest way to identify the poison was to test the victim's blood. Henry decided to use his own immortal body as a test subject. When Abel injected the dispatcher's blood into Henry, it only took 5 seconds before Henry began the painfully familiar process of dying and returning to life. Once revived, Henry discovered that the poison was aconitine, extracted from wolf's bane. This fast-acting toxin could penetrate the bloodstream through skin contact, causing stomach burns and lung damage. Before Henry could take further action, Joe arrived with officers and invited Henry to the police station for questioning. Based on the recovered pocket watch and items found in the basement, the police suspected Henry of being the poisoner. Henry explained his discovery about the wolfsbane toxin to Joe, arguing that its quick onset suggested the killer must have been on the subway at the time. As he passionately presented his findings, Henry realized he was inadvertently incriminating himself. The police thought so too, which was why they had brought him in for investigation. Henry argued, "If I were the one responsible, why didn't I cover up the evidence during the autopsy? Instead, I clearly stated that the dispatcher was poisoned. Such a foolish act of incriminating myself is something I wouldn't do." Joe admitted that Henry's reasoning made sense, and since the police didn't have concrete evidence against him, they had no choice but to let him go. Henry felt there was a crucial piece of information they were overlooking. Returning to his workshop, he began analyzing the situation with his colleagues. Later, a sudden turn of events occurred. A suspect threw a vial of poison at Joe. At that moment, Henry couldn't pursue the perpetrator because the poison had already started entering Joe's bloodstream. He only had 1 minute to act. Henry grabbed a bottle of ethanol from the table, quickly pouring it on his hands to neutralize the toxin. His swift actions managed to save Joe's life. The investigation revealed that the suspect, Hans, was a chemical expert. 3 years earlier, Hans's wife had accidentally fallen onto the subway tracks and was killed by an oncoming train. The driver at the time was the recently deceased dispatcher. It became clear that Hans had meticulously planned this act of revenge. However, Henry was puzzled. He had thought the mysterious person's actions were targeted at him. Further investigation uncovered that Hans had been working to make the wolfsbane toxin more soluble, aiming to produce large quantities of the poison. It appeared his target wasn't limited to a single person. He might have intended to harm a much larger group. Henry noticed several strange drawings on the table. Flipping one over, he realized the design resembled the roof structure of the central train station, a place he had visited years ago. Coincidentally, this was also the location where Hans's wife had died. Everyone immediately grasped the severity of the situation. The police quickly surrounded the central train station to prevent further catastrophe. The station hall was crowded, but there was no sign of Hans. Henry noticed the ventilation ducts along the walls and realized something odd. Despite the unusually cold night, the air conditioning was blowing cold air. He suspected Hans had made the poison airborne to spread it through the ventilation system. Henry and Joe climbed to the rooftop where the ventilation system was installed, but they didn't find anything unusual. Henry thought he might have been overthinking the situation. Suddenly, Hans appeared and forced Henry to place the poison into the ventilation system. Henry tried reasoning with him, but Hans was too consumed by anger and ignored him. Wielding a gun, Hans shot Henry in the chest with deadly precision. At the critical moment, Henry, fueled by sheer willpower, stood up and tackled Hans, pulling him off the roof. Both men fell, losing their lives instantly. Henry's consciousness drifted through a timeless void. Meanwhile, Joe woke up in the hospital to see a handsome man standing by the window. It was Henry, who explained that Hans had realized his mistakes at the last moment and jumped off the roof. Fortunately, the poison hadn't been released. However, Joe couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. In his hazy state, he thought he saw people falling together from the rooftop. Henry dismissed it, saying it might be a side effect of the anesthetic. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more thrilling tales.